Welcome to the Truth Be Told Project. Live, according to your intended design.
Welcome to another episode of the Truth Be Told Project podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and today's episode is one that hits close to home for many of us. We're going to take a deep dive into a question that I know a lot of you have been wrestling with. I have at times wrestled with it myself, and that question is, how do you find your God-given purpose in a world that never seems to shut up? Let's be real for a moment. The world we live in is extremely loud. There's noise everywhere. Your phone, social media, your friends, your family, your career pressures, and let's not forget societal expectations. The list can go on and on. It's like standing in the middle of Times Square trying to have a conversation with someone on the other side of the street, and the person you're trying to talk to is none other than God himself. It's not an easy task, right? But here's the thing. What if I told you that even in the midst of all the noise that goes on in the world, God is still speaking. He hasn't stopped. The real question is, are you listening? Or have you gotten so caught up in the chaos that you've drowned out his voice? Today we're going to address the pain points and the questions that you've shared with me about struggling to find your purpose and hear God's voice in this noisy, overwhelming world. By the end of this episode, I want you to walk away not only with clarity, but also some practical steps on how to tune out the noise and dial in to what God is calling you to do. So that's what comes up today on the Truth Be Told Project. Let's start by addressing the most obvious elephant in the room: societal noise. Everywhere you look, the world is telling you what you should do, who you should be, and what success looks like. Social media, for instance, it's like a constant stream of you're not doing enough, you're not good enough. You know I'm right about that. Let me hit you with something provocative for a second. The devil doesn't need to destroy you if he can distract you. Let me say that again. The devil doesn't need to destroy you if he can distract you. And what better way to distract you than through endless scrolling, comparison, and chasing after the world's idea of success? God's voice is still, it's steady, but we're out here chasing every new trend, every new hashtag, trying to keep up with the world's idea of success, when God has already set a different path for us. Here's a story for you. I remember a time when I was caught up in trying to build my career, trying to build my platform, that I couldn't hear God at all. I was creating Christian content, but I couldn't hear God in the midst of creating that content, but I still went with the flow of it. I prayed, but honestly, I couldn't hear him. Why? Because my mind was so cluttered. It was so cluttered with chasing the next idea. What will make good content for addressing this topic or this subject? I was looking for validation. I was looking for subscribers. I was looking for views. But I was looking for validation everywhere, but from the person where validation matters the most, and that is God. It wasn't until I cut out some of the distractions and made intentional space for God that I began to sense his direction again. I began to hear his voice again. I began to feel that peace again. I'm not moved by deadlines. I'm not moved by numbers. I'm not discouraged by numbers. I hear God's voice again. Imagine you're in a room full of people, all talking at the same time. There's one person in the corner softly calling your name, but you can't hear them. Not because they aren't calling you, but because the room is too loud. And that's how it is with God. He's there, but we have to turn down the noise. I don't know if you guys remember a story in the Bible about the prophet Elijah and how he was seeking God on a specific issue, and he expected to hear God loudly, hear God in the thunder, and hear God in the wind, but instead he heard him in a still small voice. Sometimes we have too much stuff going on. We have to turn down the noise so we can actually speak to God, because God is not going to overtalk all of the noise in your life. God wants you to make space for him, to make room for him, to hear from him. So how do we start? Step one is recognizing what noise you need to cut out. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's toxic relationships. Maybe it's even your own inner critic. Maybe you need to cut some of your work hours at work. You're working over 40 hours a week. And some of you are doing too much. You're too busy. Whatever it is, if it's drowning out God's voice, it needs to go. Now let's talk about the uncertainty that so many of us face. Many of you have told me that you feel unsure of God's calling on your life. You want to know your purpose, but you just don't know, or you're worried you'll get it wrong. Here's the one thing no one likes to admit. Most of us are more afraid of missing God's plan than actually hearing his voice. Think about that. We're so terrified that we'll make the wrong move, we'll make the wrong decision, that we get stuck in the limbo of inaction. Think of it like driving a car with the emergency brake on. You're pressing this gas, you're giving it gas, but you're not going anywhere because you're so scared of moving forward. What's the irony in it? God's plan often unfolds as we move, not as we sit in indecision. If you guys will remember the story of Abraham, remember when God called Abraham to leave everything he knew, leave his family, leave his country, to go to a place that he will disclose to him at a later date. He did not give Abraham all the details before Abraham moved. He just told him, I need you to go, and when you get to where I want you to be, that's when I'll let you know. So what am I saying? I'm saying God's plan often unfolds as we move, not as we sit and wait for God to part the sky and say, I want you to go here, and I want you to do this, that, and the third. God just doesn't work that way. Uncertainty isn't a sign that you're far from God. In fact, it's often an invitation to draw closer. God rarely shows us the full picture. He reveals the next step. So instead of asking God for a roadmap for your life, start asking him what your next step should be. Trust me, he'll reveal it, even if it's just one step at a time. Another big pain point I hear about is feeling spiritually disconnected. You're praying, but it feels like God is distant. Or maybe you're going through a dry season when you're not feeling much at all. Trust me, I get it. I've been there plenty of times. Just came out of that kind of season in my life. We all go through those seasons where it feels like we're wandering in the desert. But let me tell you something. Just because God is silent doesn't mean he's absent. And sometimes the silence is where God does his best work in us. Think about this for a moment. I want you to think about this for a moment, please. Think about a seed planted in the ground. It's buried, it's unseen, and it looks like nothing is happening. But deep below the surface is growing roots. That seed needs the dark, hidden place before it can sprout above ground. So what I'm saying is this: sometimes God uses the quiet seasons to grow your roots deep so you can withstand whatever is coming next. At this moment, you may not be ready to move, so God wants you to grow your roots and he wants them to grow deep so you can withstand and you can be able to handle whatever is coming next. So if you're feeling spiritually dry, right now, don't lose hope. God is still at work. Even in the midst of silence, keep seeking him, keep being faithful, and you'll see the fruit in time. You'll start to see results. Trust me. Trust me on that. Be patient. A lot of times we want things to happen now, right now. We want things to change at the moment that we want it. We live in an instant society. Microwave ovens, drive-through restaurants, all give us instant gratification. But God is not moved by our timetable. God is not interested in instantly gratifying us. But God wants to progressively grow us. So chill out and trust God. Trust the process. Let's talk about decision making. I can't tell how many of you have said you feel overwhelmed by making right choices for your life. You want to be in the right career. You want to have the right relationships. You want to have the right future. But here's a hard truth. God is more concerned with who you're becoming than where you're going. Take Abraham in the Bible. God told him to, I'm referring to this story again because this story really sticks out and it really hits the target. God told Abraham to go to a land he would show him, but he didn't give him the exact destination. Why? Because the journey was more about Abraham's faith and obedience than it was about the geography. So instead of agonizing over every little detail, focus on becoming the kind of person God can use no matter where you end up. Choose character over destination. That's what matters most to God. So finally, let's touch on this confusion between what the world tells us we should want and what God is actually calling us to pursue. We live in a culture that says success looks like fame. It looks like money. It looks like influence. But God's definition of success is often the opposite. Remember the story of King Saul and David. Saul was everything the world wanted in a king. He was tall, he was slim, he was good looking, he was charismatic, but God chose David, a shepherd boy with a heart after his own. God doesn't care about outward success. He cares about the heart. So stop chasing after the world's version of success and start asking God what success looks like in his eyes. Trust me, it's a whole lot different and it will bring so much more peace if you trust it. You got to trust God. All right, we covered a lot today. Societal noise, uncertainty, spiritual dryness, decision-making pressure, and confusion between worldly and godly desires. But here's the big takeaway. God is still speaking, even in the noise. The question is, are you making room to listen? Are you making room to listen? Is your ears open? So here's what I want you to do this week. Take 10 minutes, just 10 minutes each day, and turn off the noise. No phone, no social media, no distractions. Just sit in stillness. Pray, ask God to speak, and listen. But give God the space to work. Also, if today's episode spoke to you, share it with someone you know who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes where we tackle even more of these real life struggles. Thanks for joining me on the Truth Be Told Project podcast. Until next time, remember, don't just live by default, live by design. God's design. Peace.
living by design, not just living by default. We are focused on our purpose, we don't compromise our walk. We got faith, we got vision, we are reaching for the stars. Stay true, keep it moving, cause we know just who we are. Yeah, biblical insights, community driven, practical living. Yeah, this is a whole vibe. Together we get it, together we winning. Yeah, here to make an impact that'll last. So welcome to the Truth Be Told Project Podcast.